totally one of those is just.
Why don't you turn around and let them get a view from there and see what the field of view looks like. You're backing into the cable. Okay. Turn around to your right, be better. I don't want to go into the sun if I can avoid it. That's right, yeah. Just leave it. All right, let it sit like that and walk around it. Houston, how's that field of view going to be? Pick up the mesa. Far away? 40, 50 feet. Why don't you turn around and let them get a view from there and see what the field of view looks like. You're backing into the cable. Okay. Turn around to your right, be better. I don't want to go into the sun if I can avoid it. That's right, yeah. Just leave it. All right, let it sit like that and walk around it. Houston, how's that field of view going to be? Pick up the mesa. Far away? 40, 50 feet. Why don't you turn around and let them get a view from there and see what the field of view. Far away? 40, 50 feet. Why don't you turn around and let them get a view from there and see what the field of view looks like. You're backing into the cable. Okay. Turn around to your right, be better. I don't want to go into the sun if I can avoid it. That's right, yeah. Just leave it. All right, let it sit like that and walk around it. Houston, how's that field of view going to be? Pick up the mesa. Far away? 40, 50 feet. Why don't you turn around and let them get a view from there and see what the field of view looks like. You're backing into the cable. Okay. Turn around to your right, be better. I don't want to go into the sun if I can avoid it. That's right, yeah. Just leave it. All right, let it sit like that and walk around it. Houston, how's that field of view going to be? Pick up the mesa. Far away? 40, 50 feet. Why don't you turn around and let them get a view from there and see what the field of view looks like. You're backing into the cable. Okay. Turn around to your right, be better. I don't want to go into the sun if I can avoid it. That's right, yeah. Just leave it. All right, let it sit like that and walk around it. Houston, how's that field of view going to be? Pick up the mesa. Far away? 40, 50 feet. Why don't you turn around and let them get a view from there and see what the field of view looks like. You're backing into the cable. Okay. Turn around to your right, be better. I don't want to go into the sun if I can avoid it. That's right, yeah. Just leave it. All right.
Find out where we came from. Find out where it is. And then I would have to go into that. Trying to figure out what's going on.
That's a bit better. A bit higher. Different angle.
All right, hello everyone, and welcome back to another live stream. Today we have round 2 of the debate between Blue Earth Thing and Marcus Allen discussing whether or not the Apollo missions to the moon were a hoax. You guys know my stance on it. I'm not going to make the same joke I did last time, but Blue Earth Thing is Blue Earth Thing is on the side of the missions having been real. Marcus Allen is on the side of them having been hoaxed. So they're going to be going through the second part of that discussion today. If you want to see the first part of the discussion, I do highly recommend it. It was very civil and very productive. So I'm hoping for some more of that today. And with that, I'm going to give you guys a couple minutes just to say hi, introduce yourselves, etc. Does anyone have a preference on who would like to go first?
I think you should go first this time.
All
Blue,
right,
go ahead.
let's go. Hi, I'm Blue Earth Thing. My YouTube channel is also Blue Earth Thing. I'm just a guy who likes science. I like space. Anything that moves under its own power, I enjoy, and stuff like that. But yeah, I believe we definitely landed on the moon. And everything like that. I don't really have much of an intro. If you want to go check out my channel, I'm building an observatory. There you go. So I think that's a cool project that I'm doing. So go check out Blue Earth Thing. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram. But other than that, I'm just a YouTuber who likes these topics. So, Marcus?
Well, thanks for that, Blue. Yeah, it's obviously I don't agree that they landed on the moon, but we'll come to that. But to be fair, I'm old. You may be able to tell if you can see me that I'm much older than Blue, and I've been investigating the Apollo record for the last 25 years. I was around when they allegedly landed on Apollo 11, and I was in London then, watched it on my little black and white television, and was really captivated by the whole emotion of the event. It was a spectacular broadcast for a start, and it was also a spectacular achievement. Which is what I thought for about 20 years. I thought, bloody hell, what an incredible thing to do! Land a man on the moon. I mean, this is epoch making. This is the moon landing film has been voted the top 25, one of the top TV moments of the 20th century. And most people can probably remember where they were when it was happening, if they were alive at the time. But as a result of investigating it, somebody brought it to my attention that the photographs were not necessarily what they purported to be. Now, I studied photography. I was at college in London studying photography, not what pictures to take, but how the technical side of photography worked. So I was in a position to examine them from a technical point of view, which is what I did. And the more I examined them, the more I discovered that there were anomalies and inconsistencies and unexplained details. And I thought, what's going on here? You know, you can't fool the world. I discovered that you can actually fool the world. It's not that difficult if you've got the right publicity behind you and the right advertising and the right creation of images to put in front of people. You can fool the world. And the more I've looked at it, the less I've come to conclude that it actually happened. Certainly not happened the way we've been told. And the main thing on that is, well, if it did happen the way we've been told, that 12 astronauts walked on the lunar surface, and another 12 orbited the moon. 3 of them actually went twice. Jim Lovell, John Young, and Gene Cernan went twice, 2 missions. Obviously, it didn't affect them because, Gene Cernan's recently died. So it's obviously the effect of the problems in space weren't considered that dangerous because you can obviously survive it. Now, when you start looking into the detail of the Apollo record, there are some major inconsistencies with what appears to be the accepted story, because you've got the consensus view. Yeah, they landed on the moon. What's the problem? You know, we've seen the pictures, we've seen the film, we've heard the astronauts, we've read the books, we've looked at, we've seen all the stuff. It's got to be real. These guys wouldn't lie. They're honourable men. Yes, they are honourable men. They're also military, so they could lie in the interest of national security. They could dissemble the truth if they felt they had to, if it was in the interest of national security. So all these things start to add up. Now, to everything that I might put forward as an idea that it is inconclusive, some of the photographs which we discussed in our previous chat, I can put forward these photographs, I can put forward other photographs, and I can make comments about them. And I can say, well, I don't think these were taken on the lunar surface for these reasons. And you can come back quite conclusively and say, well, they were. We know they were. In fact, that's one of the things I would like to discuss. What is the evidence that you have, hard, factual, incontrovertible, independently verifiable evidence that man has landed on the lunar surface? I'd like to hear that, because if I'm wrong in what I say, that man did not land on the lunar surface, as we were told, I want to know, because then I can shut up and go away and do something more productive. So I'm relying on you to give me my life back.
All right. Let's see. I guess we could start with the evidence, but there's a lot of things that I would like to discuss too.
Okay. Let's go.
Because I don't have the burden of proof. And
no, I don't. No, of course you don't.
I do not. So when I'm going to present my evidence, I'm literally going to present the footage, and that's it. I'll roll with just the footage, because there's still no way that that footage could have been faked via the inverse square law. And unless you can prove to me that we have a way of lighting the footage in the way that it's lit on the screen, then you can't convince me that it's faked. Because we're looking at vast distances. And I know I mentioned last time the rover driving from point A to point B and back to point A, and then you said that was a miniature. I highly doubt that that was a miniature. First off, there's no evidence to show that it is. If you look at the rooster tailing of the dust from the rover, that is dust that I don't believe can be mimicked in a miniature. If you build a miniature, it doesn't look anything like that. Look at the best miniature technology of the day, Star Wars. Just look at that. It looks somewhat realistic, but when it comes to the particle effects, they're terrible when you compare them to real life. And yes, Star Wars was the best miniature effects of the day. I mean, I'll just throw that out there. And that was 5 years after the moon landing, and they won the Oscar. They had the #1 effect shop in the world at the time. But so I'm just gonna roll with the footage as my evidence. But one thing else I want to get to later, after we talk about the footage a little bit, or you were talking about the problems in space and surviving in space. I would like to hear what you have to say about that. And then one more thing, because I hit you up on this while we were setting this debate up, I want to talk about the technological advances, because the last time I talked to you, you made the whole statement of if we have advanced in technology for 50 years, why haven't we been back to the moon? And you always bring up the analogy of the Lamborghini. I think it was like the really fast car. If like Lamborghini made a car that can go from 0 to 60 in like some seconds, and then later on it takes 10 times or 100 times slower to get to 0 to 60, or a similar analogy. Am I close to the analogy you usually use?
I was using that analogy to refer to the Saturn V rocket taking off and accelerating to a particular point.
Okay, that analogy I want to address in the whole point behind it, because you always talk about the technology and everything like that. And those are the topics I kind of want to get to today.
Okay, so, that's fine. Yeah, I guess
we can start with the evidence and then go down from that list.
Okay.
I'm good. My evidence is the visual library. It's the video library of the Apollo missions. If you want more, I can do the fact that we have found the landing sites on the moon. We've had other countries send satellites around and verify it.
Okay.
Exactly how they were when we left.
Okay. Well, let's take those. The visual record, the Apollo film library.
Sure.
Which is very extensive, and it is accessible on several websites. You can call up any amount of the visual record. Okay. Let's divert very slightly. I did send you reference through to the Make Believe Smoke and Mirrors film.
Yes, which I have not yet watched, but I do plan on doing, and I do plan on making a response to those.
Okay, that's fine. It's a long film. I'd recommend watching the complete film. Now, this was posted onto the internet 4 or 5 years ago, originally posted there. Unfortunately, the narrator of the film had disguised his voice to the extent you couldn't understand what he was talking about. It has recently been re-recorded with a decent voiceover, so you can understand what is being said and you can see what is being referred to in the image. Now, these films that are examined are being examined with a very sophisticated piece of software that was only developed about 10 years ago. But what they're examining is the Apollo film record from over 50 years ago. They're examining it in considerable detail. As I say, the software that is being used to examine it is very recent, or relatively recent, and it is a very sophisticated piece of filmmaking in itself. That's the make-believe smoke and mirrors film. What it examines is the Apollo film record in considerable detail. Now, there are various aspects of that, one of which is that there's a major problem. If you're going to demonstrate something that appears to take place on the lunar surface, you have to then recreate the 1/6 gravity that we know the moon has compared to the Earth. Because it's a much smaller body, it's only 27% the size of the Earth, so it has a much smaller, lower level of gravity. When we see some of the testing that was done using the enormous gantry at Langley in Virginia, 600 foot long, 300 foot wide, a couple hundred foot high. It's a huge gantry which enabled lunar landers to be lowered down at the correct speed and at the correct gravitational acceleration. It also enabled astronauts to do it. Now, when you see astronauts having 1/6 of their weight removed using pulleys and harnesses, which is quite a reasonable way to do it, they can achieve considerable physical effects. They can jump about 15, 20 foot in the air. They can do forward somersaults. They can do all sorts of activity.
What evidence do you have that they can they can jump 20 feet in the air?
It's measured in the film. There are scales on the film, and you can see, if the average person is 6 foot high, and he jumps 3 times his own height, it's about 20 foot. The indication being that it's possible in lower gravity to do it. Now,
are they just standing on the moon with just body weight only, or do they happen to have hundreds of pounds of equipment on top of them?
No, this is a test done at Virginia. I'm not saying he did it on the moon, and this is the problem. They didn't do it on the moon. Even if the spacesuits they were using and the backpacks they had, which weighed on Earth,
Kennedy?
they were weighed down by it. But the point is that their muscular force would still be the same whether they're on Earth or on the moon.
It doesn't matter what their muscular force is if
Sorry,
if
Blue.
it's 1/6 the gravity.
Blue, sorry.
And you weigh like a ton more. You weigh I think we talked about this last time, something like 300 pounds more, and you're in very stiff suits that don't allow you your full control, your full motion. If you're in those suits on the Earth, you would probably expect to be able to jump only a couple of inches. So we expect them to jump only a couple of feet up on the moon. Like I don't see what the problem is. We don't expect these guys to be jumping 20 feet in the air, doing somersaults or anything like that. We expect them to really be able to barely move. First off, because these suits are very stiff. They just had to remake the suits because the movement in them is not as good as they could be. They were about as good as they could be back then.
I'm really sorry, guys. I just want to cut in really quickly.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. For a moment ago, I thought I was muted. Skype, every other program in the world, the mute button turns red when you're muted, not gray. So I'm sorry about that. I know now, and I won't do that again.
Yeah. Did you die? Like,
No, I just had a little coughing fit there. No, I don't have the Rona.
Oh, good.
yeah.
Oh, good. Because does it transmit through Skype, do you think?
I might have to turn. If I turn my camera off, will that help me against the Rona?
No, I don't think Corona is visible.
All
It's
right.
one of
Well,
the-
let's get
Okay.
back to the discussion. Yeah.
Okay. Now, right, one point, just a slight aside on here, which will, bear with me, it will illustrate a point. Do you have a particular sports team that you support? Baseball team, football team, motor race team?
Is that an hour of topics right there? Let's see here. I can go, or I'm sporting UAB right here. That's my university. That's my alma mater. I could say that now. Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I mean, if talk about baseball, we have the Atlanta Braves. Talk about hockey, you got the Nashville Predators. Talk about basketball, go back to UAB. Talk about football, UAB. And talk about racing, Mark Martin and Red Farmer. There you go. All right, there's all my favorite major sports.
That's good. Okay, so you've got favorite teams that you support. Obviously, people that you consider to be better than other teams. Otherwise, you wouldn't support them. Maybe they don't win. All right, from my point of view, I support football team. I support Liverpool Football Club because I used to live near Liverpool. It's up in the north of England. It's probably the most famous football club around.
Yep.
And there are other football clubs in the UK. Manchester United, Arsenal, Chelsea, Tottenham Hotspur. These are all very well supported. It would never occur to me to support Manchester United. Never occur to me. Even though the cities are only 20 miles apart. It would never occur to me to support Manchester United. I wouldn't go to one of their games. I wouldn't support them. I follow them to see how badly they're playing, which they are at the moment, that sort of thing. The point I'm making here is that if you support a particular viewpoint, whether it's a sports team or a film star or an author or a social media phenomena, you support that and you tend not to take much notice of any other aspect. Now, what I'm saying here is that your view, which is a very interesting view, you support what NASA have done. You defend them against people like me who tend not to believe that NASA does everything that they say, which is fine. That's the way it is. Whether I can confirm and verify what I'm saying, you will disagree. Can I confirm and verify everything that you say? I don't know. But I will make an effort to disprove what you say. It's the difference between confirmation and falsification. There's no end to that discussion. It will go on forever because each person has their own particular viewpoint to support and to maintain that they are correct. You said at the beginning, it is not incumbent on me to prove myself right. It's incumbent upon me to prove my position, which is fine. I'm challenging the consensus view.
Yeah,
Now,
it's a challenge. Yeah.
Now, hopefully,
sit here and say that I'm like a NASA fanboy first. Well, yeah, it's true. I'm a NASA fanboy, but I came to the conclusion that we landed on the moon way before I became a NASA fanboy.
All right. So the evidence you produce in support of that is the Apollo film record,
and the lack of evidence to say that we didn't.
Okay, lack of evidence. Well, obviously, you need to listen to me a little bit more. But that's another story.
All right.
You also mentioned the lunar reconnaissance orbiter photographs of the lunar landing sites, all 6 of them.
Yeah, the ones, specifically the ones from China, which I find very.
If I'm not mistaken, that was the Selene orbiter, or was that Japan?
I thought it was the one from China. I thought that was the whole big news that China started bragging that they found.
Yes, that's right.
Site.
You're right. I'll look that up in the background here.
Yeah.
I'd be interested to see that because I've never seen any of the Chinese photographs or the China orbiter photographs claiming to be the Apollo landing sites. I've seen the lunar reconnaissance orbiter photographs, and there are always stories about how the Chinese confirmed the Apollo landing sites. But I've never seen the photographs. So if you can find them, I'd love to see them. And the Japanese as well, because they claim to have done it also.
All right, so back to the spacesuit real quick.
Okay.
The spacesuit weighed about 310 pounds total. If the astronaut was weighing 175 pounds, because that's a reasonable thing to say, then you would have a total weight of 495. That's on Earth. That's not on the moon. That's 495 on Earth. If you divide that by
6.
Yep. Let me pull up a calculator right here. See, 495 divided by 6, you get 82.5 pounds. And I don't know about you, but your average, like, I don't know what, 12-year-old, 10-year-old weighs, like 10-year-old boy weighs 82 pounds, and I don't see him jumping up in the air doing somersaults and stuff like that.
Okay, fair enough. I'm not sure that the spacesuit and the backpack weighed 300 pounds. I think it was near the same weight as the astronaut, 180 pounds.
Well, no, so the life support weighed 180 pounds. The shuttle suit, including the life support system, weighed 310.
Where is that evidence?
Let's see. I've got it right here. I'll post it. I'll post it in our chat.
Yeah.
I just pulled up something.
Are you sure that's the Apollo suit, not the ISS suit?
Let's see here. The outside suit is the same one for the Apollo and for the ISS. They were the same brand of suit.
Yeah, all made by the same company.
Well, I said brand is just like a large term. I don't know what a brand would be. It's but no, they're both the same thing. They were the same family of suit. How about that? If that's easier to say.
Okay, yeah. I mean, a spacesuit's a spacesuit. It's similar to the Russian ones as well.
Yeah.
They do the same thing.
Up until this year, we used up until last year, we've been using the same spacesuits that we used in the Apollo missions. Virtually the same. I mean, they did everything they needed it to do, so there was really no reason to change until we went back and really needed to change them, and we did, and now they look completely different. If you've seen the new ones, the ones with the metal ring at the waist and the metal ring at the arms.
I've seen those. They're not operational yet, are they?
No, they haven't been used yet. No, they're still under development.
Well, they better get a move on. They've only got 4 years to get to the moon.
They got one suit made.
They're going to need more than one suit. And they're going to have a smaller version for the ladies as well, because they're supposed to be landing women on the moon.
Yeah.
That's why it's called Artemis.
No, I think Artemis is because the moon.
Artemis is Apollo's twin sister.
Yeah.
So the implication being they're going to put women on the moon.
But Artemis is the goddess of the moon.
Apollo is the god of light.
Apollo is the god of the sun. Actually, no, he was the carrier of the sun. He carried the sun across the sky. Artemis was the goddess of the hunt, and goddess of the moon. Depending on what you said, there's like two different goddesses of the moon in the Greek mythology, and it's dependent. Sorry, I love Percy Jackson, so I know a lot about Greek mythology.
That's good.
I was going to say, this is a very interesting conversation, but we're getting a little off topic.
No, it's definitely on topic, because Artemis is a name that is coming into consciousness, public consciousness, much more now. The Artemis program, they got 4 years to get to the moon. They better get a shift on, guys, because they haven't got a rocket yet that works. They haven't got a lander designed or built.
Oh, they're testing the rocket. Well, it's been delayed until spring of 2021 due to coronavirus. But the SLS is coming along nicely. In fact, my roommate has seen bits and pieces of it, including the Orion capsule, and been up and close and personal with the fuel tank that was going under the stress testing. It's not the one that will actually go on the SLS. It's the extra one they made. It's identical to the one that's going on the SLS, and they were stress testing it in Huntsville last summer. Is when he got to go see it. So. It's coming along nicely. I know that out of Huntsville, they have started shipping out the parts all the way down, and I think construction of the rocket has begun or down there in Orlando. Someone.
Yeah, no,
But I believe that the construction has started, and its first launch will be Artemis 1, and I am going.
well, great. Take lots of pictures. Put them up on the website. I'd love to see it. In fact, I'm following it. I follow quite a few people online on the launch, because obviously it's more difficult for me to get over to see the launch than it would be for you.
Yeah.
You know, I got to take a plane and a train and a bus and hire a car. No, forget it. I'll watch it on TV.
Marcus, I would just say if you're interested in getting a really good view of any launches coming up, I would advise following Red's Rhetoric. He's down at Cape Canaveral a lot. He films as many SpaceX launches as he can, and he's going to be there for the Crew Dragon launch in a little while.
Yeah. He live streams every launch, and it's honestly the best amateur live stream that there is. Like, he's got incredible cameras that can pick it up really close detail. It's actually pretty cool.
What was the guy's name?
Red's Rhetoric.
Red's Rhetoric. I'll remember that, because there are several people. Curious Droid I follow. Everyday Astronaut.
Everyday Astronaut's cool, and he's a. If you want to talk about a space shill, Everyday Astronaut is the biggest fan of SpaceX I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah. So I saw him interviewing Elon Musk a few, whenever it was. But it's on Wednesday, isn't it? The launch of the Dragon capsule.
Yeah, my one of my best friends is actually going to go watch that. We actually have to miss playing. We have to miss one of our little events that me and him and our friends do for him to go do that, which I'm mad about. But he's going to go watch the flight. So.
Oh, don't hold it against him, because he can fill you in on it.
I am holding it against him because he can go watch him whenever he wants. He lives in Orlando, and I can't.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, move. Simple.
Oh man.
Oh,
no,
but
I think we do need to get back to a debate topic here.
All right.
Okay. Just one thing about the SLS, because we're mentioning this. This is basically the replacement for the Saturn V rocket.
Yes.
The SLS, kept in business. It's been around for about 10 years. That's when it was following the cancellation of the Constellation program. The one thing that survived from that was what became the SLS, the Space Launch System, and it was mandated by Congress that they should maintain it. Because Congress were a bit pissed off with Obama for cancelling the Constellation program, because they put a lot of money behind it, so they kept it there. Now the SLS, on paper, it looks very impressive. It's similar to the space shuttle, and it uses some of its engines. It uses the external fuel tanks. I was just watching a very good film about the recovery of the Columbia space shuttle as it broke up entering the Earth over Dallas. Fascinating how it was recovered. So hopefully we won't have to do that again. And so if the SLS is the rocket that is claimed for it, it has the achievement. It's actually not as powerful as the Saturn V rocket was. It doesn't have the same power, can't launch the same amount into lunar orbit, slightly less, which is a bit of a drawback, because the Saturn V could put 48 tons into lunar orbit. The other rocket which could appear to do it is the Starliner, is the SpaceX monstrous stainless steel new rocket, which is being developed down in Texas, I believe. But that has a major drawback in that it can't launch sufficient weight to go into lunar orbit without being refueled in low Earth orbit, which seems a bit of a drawback, because launching fuel to refuel a rocket is a very dangerous undertaking. It's not easy to do. One of the things, it's never been tested in low Earth orbit, or even in space, to refuel a rocket in space, because the fuel that they're using is hydrogen and not methane. SpaceX uses methane, hydrazine.
Which rocket is going to have to refuel in space?
The Starliner, the SpaceX proposal for the return to the moon. Yeah, you got the SLS. That's one option.
You have the which is now
the stainless steel version of Elon Musk's capsule, which is so big that's why it has to be refueled. It's so big. In order to get back off the moon, having landed there, it has to have additional fuel on board. So there are major problems behind this, and they don't seem to be. I mean, though Elon Musk is a very charismatic promoter of his proposal. I mean, he's got Tesla Motors to keep going as well, and he's got the other businesses he runs. The SpaceX is obviously his main attention at the moment. And whether he will be able to achieve what he says he can, I mean, he certainly launched one of his cars to Mars, which is quite an achievement. Whatever some people might say about that as being real or not, I think it was real. Even though Elon Musk himself said it looks so fake, it must be real.
Well, oh, hey, is did the stream go down?
Hold
on.
I think we're still on.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I had a weird screen pop up for me. Sorry about that. I reloaded and saw that we're still up, but it was like, oh, we can't reach this page right now. I was like, okay.
Oh, dear. Oh, somebody's interfering with us again.
Oh no. All right. So with spaceship or starships, you said Starliner, which is what threw me off. It's Starship, I believe.
Yeah, Starship. That's right.
Yeah.
Starlink are the satellites, the internet satellites he's putting up as well.
But with Starship is very advanced. What it will do, and I'm not so sure it will accomplish everything that Elon says it will. I'm still kind of skeptical. Now, I want it to accomplish everything.
Yeah.
I love the idea of having a basically a jet for space, because that's essentially what it will be, transporting people around the world and going to the moon and back and going to Mars and back. But I'm very skeptical on it going to do everything he says it is. I think it's going to be another situation kind of like the space shuttle, where the space shuttle was promised to do all these things and it barely accomplished all the things that it did. Now, it did the things it had to do right, but the reusability was kind of overblown when they were proposing it. But so I think the same thing's going to happen with Starship. But back to the SLS, the SLS won't have to do all the things that Starliner will have to do.
No, that's true. Quite right.
And so if the SLS is able to accomplish its goal, I don't see why we would have to talk about Starliner.
Well, it's one of the proposals, because they haven't decided on a land yet.
It's a private proposal. It's not a proposal to Congress or anything. And it's not really a proposal, and Elon doesn't have to propose to anybody about it.
No, he doesn't. But there are three options for the lander, the lunar lander, for the Artemis lander. One is SpaceX. One is the basically NASA in conjunction with SpaceX, and the other is Dynetics, which is a company I don't know very much about. But that hasn't been decided yet. They haven't decided which lander to use yet.
Okay.
The rocket to take it to the moon will have to be designed to take into account the size of it, the weight of it, how many astronauts are going to be involved with it. And then you've got the gateway business, the orbiting
gateway's been decided. When it comes to the lander, you don't really have to design the rocket around the lander. You got to design the lander around the rocket. That's typically how it works. Here's an example. When it came to the moon rover, the lunar rover, they didn't actually plan on doing the lunar rover until the missions had already started, and they didn't design. They had to design that thing in a year. They got a year because they finally said, okay, we have this compartment on the lander that is going to be unused for these last two missions, or these last three missions. Yeah. Figure out how to put a rover in there. And that's what they did. And that's what's going to happen with this lander. And the lander has been under development for a while now. They just haven't decided which one they're going to go with 3 people gunning for the contract. And that's how space exploration works when it comes to building ships and building the parts of them. You just have multiple people compete who has the best design.
Sure. Yeah. No.
I don't see any problems here. and they have 4 years. That's a good amount of time, especially when you have hundreds of engineers on it.
Oh, I hope there are thousands of them because they're going to need all the help they can get. You know, it's a big undertaking.
It's a very big undertaking, but I think we can do it.
Well, I hope you're right. I really do hope you're right because I want to be around to see it happen.
Okay.
And we got 4 years to go, just over 4 years to go.
All right.
And
Can
November 2024, I believe, is the final date.
Got there, Kevin.
I just want to point out, of course, the way things operated in the Apollo days is different from how they do today, but the first crewed flight of the Apollo program was Apollo 7 in 1968, and they landed just 1 year later.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know what the gap between finishing designing the Saturn V and the lander and everything and Apollo 7 was, but I guess that'd be the big thing to find out.
The gap between what and what?
Between like designing and finishing designing the Saturn V and the lander, and
About 6 years.
6 years. Okay.
I think
Yeah.
so.
Actually, one point, Apollo 7, full Saturn V rocket.
No, that was a Saturn one.
It was a Saturn 1 because it only went into Earth orbit.
Okay.
The major problem was with Apollo 6, which was unmanned. It was the first.
That was not a major problem, though. I completely disagree with everybody, with you guys, like poisoning the well with it, calling it a major problem. It wasn't. The rocket still accomplished every single goal it went out to do.
Yes, it did, according to the record. But if you've got the sort of anomalies going on within the rocket, which they spent a long time trying to resolve the problem, and they claim to have resolved the problem.
So you believe them? So you believe them when they say that there were anomalies, but then you go, oh, according to the record, when they say that it still accomplished everything it had to do.
Well, I think I would also add that the shuttle program, for instance, they had known problems with the O-rings and with foam shedding from the first launch, and never dealt with it until it claimed lives.
Yeah. And as was it Richard Feynman says, you can't fool nature. Irrespective of the PR aspects, you can't fool nature. He was on the Challenger inquiry panel along with Neil Armstrong. Because if the Apollo launch site had been warned on the launch of Columbia that the temperature was too low for the O-rings, and they still went ahead with the launch because it was such an important political requirement to get it off the ground at a particular time. In January 24th, I think it was launched. My birthday. I remember it.
I'm sorry, that was Challenger, not Columbia, but or everything else you were correct on, yes.
Yeah. Can we get back to Apollo?
Sorry?
Can we get back to Apollo?
Yeah, okay. Back to Apollo. If Apollo 6 had problems, let's just say that. It had problems. It wasn't a perfect launch. It wasn't a perfect flight.
Okay, it wasn't a perfect one, sure.
Now, the next launch of Apollo 5, of the Apollo 5, was going to be, of the Saturn V was going to be Apollo 8.
Yes.
Now, that was supposed to be a test launch. There's a bit of political chicanery went on at this point because the head of the Apollo management team was James Webb. And he was, at the time of the launch of Apollo 8, he was not in America. He was in Vienna at a conference. He was not present. When he heard that Apollo 8 had launched as a manned flight to orbit the moon, he was incandescent with rage. Now, why would that be? Is it because he had been taken out of the loop? Because he actually resigned his position, which he held for 7 years. He resigned his position 2 weeks later.
Okay.
Now, that could be because he had been overridden. I think it was Thomas Paine who took over in his absence.
I imagine a lot of people high up don't like it when people go over their head.
Well, it's not a wise thing to do, to go over the head of somebody who's senior to you. James Webb was held in a very high regard, not only by NASA, but by the politicians he was dealing with. Because he dealt with John Kennedy as well, and was trying to persuade John Kennedy in 1962 to try to scale back the whole idea of it being this plant a flag, collect rocks, come back from the moon stuff. He said, we've got to get a bit more scientific about it. He was trying to persuade Kennedy to row back on his deadline, which he'd announced in May 1961. Now, okay. Kennedy in September 1963 did make a speech at the United Nations offering cooperation with the Soviet Union.
Yep.
Now, whether that implies that there were problems with the development of Apollo and why bother to do it in competition, why don't we do it in cooperation, I don't know, because Kennedy was killed about a month later. So we'll never actually know the answer unless we can dig out his notes from his presidential library, which seems a reasonable place to start. The point is that why would the head of NASA, a man highly respected within the organization, resign 2 weeks after the apparent successful launch of Apollo 8? It makes no sense.
It's because there was a massive amount of competition in which he lost.
Sorry, say it again?
There's a massive amount of competition at that level of NASA. And when you lose, when they go the different direction from what you've been advocating for a while, I imagine that would make you extremely mad.
Yeah.
I don't think it has to do with the fact that, sure, he might have thought that it would have been dangerous and he didn't want to have anything to do with it, but I don't think that's any evidence to show that there was a problem with Apollo 8.
Well, on the face of it, there was no problem with Apollo 8. It was apparently a very successful mission.
It was it was.
It was the very first mission to send men beyond low Earth orbit. Mm-hmm. The first time it had ever happened.
Yes. There
is no discussion in the transcripts of any inquiry from Houston. How's it going? How's the radiation levels? You got your meters there. How are they reading? There's none of that. There's no apparent concern about what is going on.
Why should there be? The amount of radiation that they would experience on the way there and on the way back is less than the
one chest X-ray
than the average nuclear power station worker over a year. If they only have to experience it one time, well, then if you have a nuclear power worker, and he works at that plant for like 10 years, well, then he's going to get 10 times the amount of radiation than any of the astronauts would.
No, so, that's rubbish. Absolute bloody nonsense, and you know it. This is one of those deliberate confirmations of the Apollo myth. There was no problem with radiation. This has gone on for far too long. If that is the case, why did the Soviet Union, when asked when they were going to send cosmonauts to the moon, say when we can ensure their safe return due to the dangers of radiation? They knew there was a problem. It hasn't been solved today. That's why 50 years later, we still haven't gone through.
You bring up that guy saying that the radiation is a problem for our situation, I'm going to laugh. In that clip, if you bring up that video clip, the guy in that video clip talking about us sending guys, I think it was for the Constellation program, I'm going to laugh.
No, I'm saying it was the Soviet Union saying it in the mid-1960s when they were asked, are you going to be sending cosmonauts to the moon? And they said, yes, we intend to, when we can ensure their safe return due to the dangers of radiation. Nothing to do with the Constellation program. This is the Soviet Union I'm talking about. They should have known what they were talking about.
All right, so...
They did know what they were talking about. That's
the astronauts were exposed to approximately 50 to 2,000 MSV. And the risk of cancer caused by ionizing radiation is well documented at radiation doses above 100 MSV. So it seems
I know all those figures, and I've seen all the reports, and I've seen all the evidence that it's no worse than a chest X-ray, And it's absolute crap.
All right, what evidence do you have that it's absolute crap? What evidence do you have?
Right.
What are the calculations you've gone through to show that that's absolute crap?
Okay, when the Orion capsule was tested in December 2014, it carried on it radiation meters. Because obviously they want to record what it was going to be. The Orion capsule went 3,600 miles out from Earth, came back again. So it went through the inner radiation belt, not the outer belt, just the inner belt. And those radiation measurement meters recorded far higher levels than had been expected, which is a bit odd. You'd think that with the Apollo, they would have worked out how much radiation there was, but they hadn't.
They change.
Yes, of course it changes owing to the energy generated by the sun, because that's where the radiation derives from. In part, it's solar particle events. You've got galactic cosmic rays coming from deep space, which are far more lethal than the stuff coming from the sun, which, was it August the 4th, I think, 1972, between Apollo 16 and 17, there was a major solar flare. And even NASA admit that if the astronauts had been out in space at the time that hit, they would have been killed, because the level of radiation was far in excess of anything that humans could survive. So this problem of radiation, I accept the figures you read out because they're part of NASA's record. I don't believe that NASA are telling the truth about those levels of radiation, because if they were, the question would immediately be asked of them, well, if these levels are so high, how come the astronauts on the Apollo program survived evidently with no problem to their health? Because what radiation does is damage your DNA. Also the reproductive function. No astronaut that allegedly went to the moon fathered a child after his return. They became fathers before they went. The point is that radiation is lethal to humans unless they are protected properly. Why is it that all these new rockets are being discussed, certainly the ones that are supposed to be going to Mars, which you forget that's not going to happen, and they have to carry radiation protection? Well, if you're going to go to Mars, yes, you're going to be out in space for about a couple of years, so you're going to be exposed to a considerable amount of radiation. If you're going to the moon, you're going to be exposed on the new proposals for anything up to 3 or 4 weeks on the lunar surface.
You were talking about in 2014 how the Orion capsule experienced far higher levels of radiation.
Yes.
Where's the source for that? Where's that? I would love to see the numbers.
It's in the Orion mission reports. I can't lay hands on it at the moment, but I've read them. There are graphs showing the levels of radiation against distance, and you get a standard level of radiation just going along, and suddenly it shoots up, goes along, comes down again. This is how you would expect radiation to be present.
And what does it shoot up to?
I forget the figures that they were using, but it's considerably higher than before they entered the radiation levels, which were maybe two, three times.
All right. Well,
Now,
if it's 2 or 3 times, then 6,000 is considerably higher than 2,000, but it's still much lower than 100,000, which MSVs, which is what you would expect to have to get cancer.
Right, MSVs, millisieverts, which are quite small measurements. Now,
and also, what makes you think they didn't have any kind of radiation protection on the capsules? Lead is not the only form of radiation protection.
No, it's not.
Especially for the radiation that's in space, which is a different kind of radiation than you would get with an X-ray.
Yes, the one of the protections you can use is hydrogen, basically a plastic, a polyethylene, which contains hydrogen, is a form of protection, which contains hydrogen. But so far as Apollo is concerned, I have seen no evidence that the astronauts had any radiation protection in their spacesuits. Because I asked the manufacturers of the spacesuit, a company called Hamilton Standard over in Connecticut. I wrote to them and said, what radiation protection was built into the Apollo spacesuits? Because if they obviously protected the astronauts from the radiation in space. Could those same spacesuits be used to go into Chernobyl or 3 Mile Island and clear up the mess? And they said, we built them according to the specification that NASA provided to us. You better ask them. I'm still waiting for the reply. So I don't know what protection was built in, because I haven't been told by NASA. They won't release it. They won't tell me the information. So if anybody has that information, how were the spacesuits protected from the radiation in deep space? Not talking about the Van Allen belts here, we're talking about deep space. Cislunar space, as Neil Armstrong refers to it, the space between Earth and the Moon. Because that has radiation in it. It comes from the sun, it comes from deep space. You have to be protected as a human. As an unmanned satellite, you can design the satellite to withstand the radiation. It's called hardening, where the electronics is protected, the electronics is shielded from the radiation, and that's quite easy to do. It's not so easy to protect humans or biological entities from it. Now, at some point, somebody's going to come up, well, what about Zond 5 then? Zond 5 was a Russian unmanned craft launched in September 1968 to orbit the moon. And the Russians, being good chess players, put not only biological life, they put two what they call turtles, which I would call a tortoise or a terrapin, that sort of sized animal, some seeds, some biological plants, things like that. Sent them off to the moon in the Zond 5, orbited the moon, came back, landed. First time it had ever happened, by the way. First time a craft had ever returned from lunar orbit and landed back on Earth in one piece, because those two little turtles were still alive. Probably a bit pissed off, but glad to be home. So the evidence would appear to indicate that biological life can survive in the radiation environment in cislunar space, up to the moon. Except when you then realize that turtles have an ability to survive thousands of times greater levels of radiation than humans can. So it's not a fair comparison. But what the Russians also did, I said they're good chess players, they played a very, very interesting game. They put on board Zond 5 a tape recorder with a recording of a cosmonaut. I don't know who it was, it doesn't really matter. And that tape recorder was switched on as Zond 5 orbited the moon, and the voice of this cosmonaut came back saying, oh, I can see the lunar surface, I can almost touch it, it's so close, it's so beautiful, look at those craters, as if there was somebody on board Zond 5.
I'm still trying to figure out what the stuff about the radiation on the moon. I'm trying to find the levels of radiation on the moon to start with, the base levels.
Well, surely Apollo's got that, haven't they? They went there.
Just looking up what the actual... Let's see here.
Well, while you're looking for that, Ugly German Truce has been pasting some things into the chat here from Orion test flights.
Mark the chat, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Orion test flight.
Orion's first test flight, Exploration Test Flight 1, or EFT-1, was successfully completed in December 2014 along a trajectory traversing the peak flux regions of the Van Allen proton belt. The upcoming Orion mission, referenced to as Exploration Mission 1, is a test flight scheduled for 2019. It will reach cislunar space for a total mission duration of 21 to 42 days. The Van Allen proton exposure during EM1 is expected to be lower than EFT1, primarily due to faster transit through the belts, but significantly higher than that experienced by the International Space Station during South Atlantic anomaly passes. They tested a new method to detect radiation for future missions, and to do that, they went through the worst parts of the Van Allen belts consciously.
Yeah,
Right.
and then I just found the standing radiation levels on the moon, and it's roughly 380 and 101 or 110. Let's see. So that's much less than dangerous levels, it looks like. That's just from 5 minutes of Google searching. If I was given more time, I could do more research on that. But
Well, in that case, should this maybe be a subject that you guys might want to come back to once you got some more information?
we could do that. We could change subjects if you want.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. I always find it fascinating when discussing the Apollo missions. The subject of radiation always seems to crop up as being either complete and non-event, don't worry about it, it's no worse than a couple of sunburns, or it's a major problem, it's the showstopper of space. So we've got these two viewpoints, that it's either a problem or it's not. And I say, based on the evidence that I've read and seen and discussed and heard mentioned, that it's much more of a problem than people trying to diminish it claim.
It's a problem that you can solve, and when you solve the problem, then it's not that bad. One of the biggest problems with radiation in space is not as much with people and manned missions. It's actually unmanned missions and satellites. With the modern day electronics and how electronics are nowadays, the radiation affects that much more than. Sorry, I was looking at the live stream. And I was looking up myself. Yeah. And I can't do that. It's has a much larger effect on the satellite.
Sorry about that. My internet burped for a minute. We should be good.
Yeah,
now.
We're back live.
Okay.
Yeah, we're live.
Sorry about that.
Can't wait for Starlink to come along. Then we can all get online, keep it safe.
It's not going to be that good of internet, though.
No, but it'd be better than the buffering that we get at the moment, wouldn't it? I mean, fortunately,
I get internet.
Fortunately, my internet's pretty good in the UK. We've got pretty high-speed internet. I don't know if it's that fast, but
we're good. Kennedy's got that Canuck internet and that stuff. It doesn't do too good.
Yeah. Anyway, let's just leave radiation aside. When Blue can do the research, I'll do a bit of research, but maybe we'll come back and have some more definitive answers. But
can we move on to technologies?
Was it EM2, which is going to orbit the moon? That's supposed to be the next Orion launch. That will determine whether it's for real or not, because it's going to be watched very, very closely. But there is another problem in space which doesn't get discussed all that much until recently, and that's the levels of vacuum and the effect of vacuum on spacecraft and on humans and on equipment. The level of vacuum at the moon is severe. It's known technically as a hard vacuum, which is much harder than the vacuum at the ISS, and certainly much harder than any vacuum that can be reduced here on Earth, even at the Glenn Research Center in Ohio, which was used as the test bed. If you've got a very hard vacuum, you get two effects. You get liquids outgassing, and you get metals cold welding. Now, metals cold welding is basically what it says on the tin. You put two metals together, and they will literally weld themselves together, because the vacuum is so powerful at that point that it literally pulls out from the metal, starting with the more volatile elements and going down. So the molecules of outgassed metals intermingle and join together, hence welding. So what you've got is a major, significant, probably much worse than radiation, which you can protect against. You can't actually protect against the vacuum of space. It's all around you.
We've known about cold welding since the 40s.
Yes, I know. It isn't new, but no. If cold welding exists, I think we can agree that it does.
Yeah.
In severe vacuum, in hard vacuum, how do any two metals, and the helmet of a spacesuit is attached to the body of the spacesuit by a metal ring.
Yeah, because when they're coming from Earth, they have a layer. I've heard this a long time ago, and I'm trying to find something that's talking about it again. But I believe when it comes from Earth, it has like a layer of oxygen or a layer of atoms around it that prevents the cold welding from happening. If you have two pieces of metal that were from space, then you will get it. But if you have metal from Earth, you won't.
No, those oxygen molecules will be outgassed, so they won't protect it. You can protect metal in space in a vacuum with a form of Teflon. The Teflon itself actually does outgas, but it does protect the metals. So one of the other major problems is, if that is correct, and I think we'd agree that cold welding is something which exists and can be demonstrated to exist. If you put any metals in space, they're likely to cold weld. For instance, the shutter of the Hasselblad camera is consisted of 6 individual leaves. It's a leaf shutter, not a curtain shutter.
All right.
It's also within the lens of the camera.
All right. I figured. Here's the prevention of accidental cold welding right here. All right. You got your material selection. Like coated surfaces. Selected materials can be coated, painted, oxidized, chemical, film, coated to reduce contact adhesion. So you can reduce actuator dependency, secure passive structures, cleanliness, lubrication, reduce contact surfaces, and reduce environmental exposure. There's a paragraph on each one of those topics sitting here, but yeah, that's from spaceexchange.com. That's just how you typically address cold welding.
At what level of vacuum?
In space.
Where in space? ISS level?
The difference in vacuum between the ISS level and on the moon is not extremely different.
It's 3 times higher.
So what? 1 is 3 is 1. It's 3 times higher than 1. Right.
Vacuum levels are measured in what's called torr, named after Evangelisco Torricelli, who was an Italian scientist who developed the barometer back in the 1600s.
Yeah.
Named after him. A torr level of vacuum, you get 0 at sea level here on Earth. At the ISS, you get torr to the minus 10 to the minus 3 level of vacuum. Sorry, 10 to the minus 6, hence the Glenn Research Center. On the lunar surface, you get torr 10 to the minus 12.
Okay.
Now, each level of that, 1, 2, 3, it's 10 times. It's a logarithmic scale.
I know how a logarithmic scale works.
Right. If you know a logarithmic scale, so if you've got 10 to the minus 6 going to 10 to the minus 12, you're increasing.
So it's still a very tiny amount, because you're talking about like tiny decibels. Tiny decibels. So saying that it's 3 times larger, it's insignificant.
Well, if you say so, I don't agree with you. I don't agree that is an interpretation you can make of it.
That's just math.
It may be math, but a logarithmic scale
1 is 3 times less than 0.00003. Like they're both very tiny, and they're separated by 0.00002 of a unit. The separation is tiny. It's just that the difference of them is 3 times the amount. It's relative.
Yeah, it is relative. What I'm saying is that the level of vacuum on the moon is greater than the level of vacuum at the ISS.
And then what I'm saying is that difference is basically irrelevant when we're talking about cold welding and we're talking about in space. Because the difference is so tiny. The difference is minuscule.
That's an interpretation you put on it.
Interpretation. That's what the difference is. The difference is minuscule.
Well, if you say so, I'll accept it.
So that's what you say. So that's from the numbers you gave me. It's like 0.11 zeros and then a number.
Yes, 10 to the minus 6.
All right, 10 to the minus
is 10 with 6 zeros.
If it's 10 to the minus 2, and the difference between 10 to the minus 2, and then the same number with the 6. That's
Well, the 10
10
to the minus,
that's was it?
10 to the minus 2 is 100. 10
Wait,
to the
hold on.
minus 3 is 1,000.
I thought
10
you
to
said
the minus 4 is 10,000. 10 to the minus 5 is 100.
Hold on.
100.
Numbers different. If you're going 10 to the minus are you going 10 to the minus 2, or is it 2 to the minus 10? So I thought you said the first time.
Right. If you start at 10 to the minus 3 level at the ISS, and you go 10, you then go to 10 to the minus 12 on the moon.
Okay.
You're going up.
Those numbers?
Yes.
That's not 3 times difference.
No, it's tens of thousands of times difference. That's the problem.
So where do the numbers come from that you said it was 3 times difference? Because when we first started talking about this, you said it was 3 times the vacuum on the moon than it is around the ISS level.
Perhaps I underestimated it. Anyway,
All right.
there is
source me those numbers because I'm looking for them.
All right. You see, this is what I said right at the beginning. We're talking confirmation or falsification. You can confirm everything that you want to confirm. I don't have a problem with that because it makes for a very interesting discussion. If we all agreed on the same thing, we'd go nowhere. I'm trying to falsify much of what you're saying, obviously without a great deal of success at the moment because you're not agreeing it any more than I'm agreeing with very much of you falsifying what I'm saying.
Negative.
It's just that there are 2 aspects of this particular problem. There probably won't be a definitive answer. There probably won't be anybody who can say, okay, I get it. This is the answer. There probably won't be that because people are so invested in the Apollo story that to turn around, I mean, I doubt very much if you could face any of your Apollo supporting friends.
I found the vacuum difference. All right, so the vacuum difference on the moon is 3 times 10 to the negative 15 atmospheres. So that's 0.3 in pascals and nanopascals. And the atmosphere in low Earth orbit. See, I just saw it. It was back to the page. That is 10 to the negative. Let's see. 22.2 to impact space vacuum pressure. Thought I found it. It was just the Tor. A vacuum level then 10 to the minus 4 to 10 to negative to minus 7 is required. Thought I saw it, but on the moon it's all right. Ultra high vacuum, low Earth orbit. Here we go. 5 times 10 to the negative 10. That's not that big of a difference. That's still extremely. That's still extremely low Tor in low Earth orbit.
And how does that compare to the lunar surface?
That would be, I think it was 3 times 10 to the negative 15. It's not that big of a difference. There's still, like we're talking, point. Yeah.
Pause it.
So that means it's 100. That means it's That means it is 100,000.
Compared to
Difference.
thousand.
Between the two is 100,000.
Yep. And on the moon, it's God knows what, 15 zeros.
The difference between the two, the difference between a 15 zeros and 10 zeros, math on my top of the head, which I haven't done this in a while, should be 100,000.
Well,
that's tiny. 100,000 is a
100,000 is not tiny in terms of logarithmic scale. It's not tiny. It's big. It's huge. It's vast.
No, it's not. If you have object A and you have object B, and object A is 1/100,000th more of whatever you're measuring than the other one, that's not a lot.
No, it's not. But if you're measuring it that way, that's not the same way as doing a logarithmic scale measurement. 100,000ths is still quite a lot more than 1/10,000th, which is the difference between 4 and 5 zeros.
We're not talking. No, the actual difference, the difference between the two numbers is 100,000th.
When it comes to vacuum, that's significant.
Is it now?
Yes, it is. When Apollo was being developed, they had a budget, or total budget, of about $25 billion in 1970. No, hang on a minute. About $25 billion in 1970 terms. Okay? $25 billion. 10% of their budget was spent on vacuum testing at the Glenn Research Center. It cost $1.6 billion to build the damn place because they had to make sure it didn't collapse. It's quite big. It's got 8-foot thick walls. It's got a huge parabolic steel dish underneath it. It's a vast amount of expenditure went into the vacuum testing, not the equipment, not the rockets, not the landers, not the spacesuits, not the training for astronauts. They got shipped off to Hawaii and Vegas and wonderful places like that. They spent the money on building their vacuum testing chamber. Why bother if there's no problem about vacuum? There is a problem about vacuum. And this is one of the things which Apollo had originally demonstrated, because the Glenn Research Center was built before anybody had been out to the moon. They had to work out how to get there. If there wasn't a problem with vacuum, why build something that costs about 10% of your budget? It makes no sense. Any more than a lot of other things don't make much sense when you start examining it unemotionally, scientifically, and from a numerical point of view, which is what I try to do. I concede that some of the things I propose may not stack up because I haven't got all the information. You've obviously got a great deal more information about some things, and I'll listen to what you say because you may well teach me some important and valuable lessons. I hope you do. Similarly, I would hope that some of the things I say make a degree of sense to you and can be taken as something which is a logical progression. Now, if they don't, and if you don't take anything I say as having any validity at all, we may as well end the conversation right now. I don't think we should, because I think we can both learn something. I always consider that I can learn something from anybody I discuss this subject with. I'm not arrogant enough to think that I understand everything to do with it. If I'm wrong about radiation, if I'm wrong about vacuum, then I want to find out. But I've gone into it in a bit of detail. I do know what I'm talking about to a certain extent. I'm not a complete idiot. And just to repeat what you generously said last time, I'm not a flat earther. Forget it. I don't go along with that.
That is true. Hey, Kennedy, can you please? I just sent in a link. Is there any way you can screen share that link?
Where'd you send it?
The
Skype?
chat, Skype. Yeah.
Okay, 2 seconds.
Yep.
Oh,
Sorry, everyone. The stream's gonna look confusing for a half second.
All right. After we get off this subject, though, can we move on to technology? That's something I really want to address with you.
yeah. No, that'd be good, because that was one of the questions. We've come a long way since we discussed the original question, haven't we? Yeah.
Let's see here.
The 3 pieces of hard evidence to demonstrate the Apollo landings happened. That's what I was asking for originally. How's Kevin doing?
He's getting it up. But when it comes to the evidence, as I said, I mean, the visual library. I'll stick with that until someone can show me how in the world the sets were lit.
Okay, I got it. This is what you do. This is your mission, should you choose to accept it. Watch Make-Believe Smoke and Mirrors. They use the Apollo film record.
All right.
And they deconstruct it. You say the inverse square law. They show you why the inverse square law, it certainly applies. I'm not saying that the inverse square law is irrelevant. The point is that if the sets on which the scenes are shot are models and miniatures, you don't need that much light.
Okay. Then you need to provide they would need to provide evidence of it being in a model.
It is. There is evidence.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, then I'll have to go see that. And if you,
Yeah.
the only way that you can line it is if it's a model, and you have to have hard evidence of it being a model, because that's an outrageous statement.
Hey, Blue.
All right, here we go. Here's the abstract right here. I think it scroll down a little bit more. Let me pull it back up on my page.
Yes, that's more or less it here. It ends here. It's just a tiny bit too much to keep on one screen. You want me to just read out this abstract? It's pretty short.
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry,
go on.
I got kicked out.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, did you not see that? There we go. Yeah, it does say that. All right. Yeah, if you read that, so the pressure. This is about the torr on. This is the vacuum measurements on the lunar surface. What this is. So it says here, the vacuum quality at the landing site is much influenced by the absorption of the rocket gases and the later release. During the surface operations by astronauts, the pressure was near 10 to the minus 8 torr. No data were obtained between the time of the surface operations and lunar sunset about 12 days later, at which time the temperature fell rapidly to the vicinity of 100 K. The pressure was about 10 to the negative 12 torr shortly after sunset. But intermittent release of gas, perhaps from within the moon itself, occasionally raised the pressure by less than an order of magnitude for as long as a day or two at a time, and on one occasion to about 10 to the negative 10 torr for about an hour. So it looks like the pressure on the lunar surface fluctuates between 10 to the negative 10 and 10 to the negative 12. As the 10 to the negative 8, I believe, was influenced by the gases from the rocket.
Yeah, could well be, but that would indicate outgassing, which we know happens on the moon. As the temperature, as the sun covers the lunar surface, temperature increases, the rocks expand. There would be an expansion of the gases within the lunar surface. Fair enough. I mean, that's logical. That's physics.
And then, so if we have that, and then we have the in low Earth orbit. What was the number I had earlier? I'm trying to find it again. But if we have the low Earth orbit, yeah, hard vacuum. Yeah, the hard vacuum of space is 10 to the negative 6 to 10 to the negative 9 torr. That's coming from the JSC Space Environment ISS mini book from 2015. Is that they expect it to be 10 to the negative 6 to 10 to the negative 9, and now we're talking about a difference that's even much less significant than what me and you originally talked about.
Well, I would still claim that
running down to a tenth.
The 10 to the negative 6 represents a million zero, 6 zeros, a million. 10 to the negative 10 is about a billion.
A million and billions, and not millionths and billionths.
No, they're a million times and a billion times higher. Not one.
It wouldn't. It would be 4 times higher. Or no, not sorry. Yeah, it would be about. Let's see. We were to have it'd be a 4 zeros difference. So yeah, it would be these millions and these millions of times difference. Actually, it really wouldn't. 10 to the negative 6. If we're going to roll with the 10 to the negative 6 number and then roll to the 10 to the negative 10th number, that's 10,000s. That's 10,000th different. 10,000 difference. But that's still a 10,000th of a difference.
Which indicates a higher level of vacuum.
By a tiny amount. By a 10,000th.
No. Well, if you say so, I just don't agree with you. That's all.
Okay. All right. Let's move on to technology then, because that's something I wanted to talk to you about. You always have that one analogy. Do you mind repeating that analogy for the audience that you like to do about the Saturn V rocket?
Which one is that?
The one about the car. If a company made a car that could do like 100 miles per gallon, and then 50 years later they came out with a car and they said the best they can do is like 10 miles per gallon, you would think there's a problem there, or is it acceleration? I've forgotten most of the analogy, but you always say that as to the Saturn V rocket.
Yes, the analogy was in the acceleration of the Saturn V rocket, and I was comparing it to the acceleration of a well-known car, say a Ford Fiesta with 100 horsepower. It could get from 0 to 60 in, let's say, 10 seconds. If you take a Ferrari 458, which weigh about the same amount, maybe the Ferrari's a little bit more, but it has, say, 500 horsepower, and it can get from 0 to 60 in 4 seconds. It's the power that is available to propel the vehicle forward that reduces the time. Now, the analogy with the Saturn V rocket is that it is possible to measure the speed at which the Saturn V rocket took off, because we know how far it traveled in a certain distance. Because of the cloud cover at the time, it was about 30,000 feet. It was thin. I think it was cirrus cloud. Anyway,
we'll roll with this. This isn't what I was talking about. Well, we can roll with it.
Okay, and that cloud cover was about 30,000 feet, about 6 miles up. And you can measure the time it takes the rocket to reach that cloud level, because you can see its shadow cast onto the top surface of the cloud as it punches through it. The cloud's not going to stop the rocket, obviously. It doesn't appear to be traveling fast enough to be able to reach the speed that it allegedly reached to get into low Earth orbit, because the rocket has to achieve a certain speed to reach low Earth orbit. Otherwise, it will just fall down, because gravitational attraction will pull it back. Now, the main problem with that is that if it wasn't going fast enough to reach the orbit speed we're told it did, what was the problem? Was it the engines were not producing the power that we're told they were? Was there less weight on board? Or was there the right amount of weight but less power in the engines to propel it fast enough to get into low Earth orbit? If it didn't get into low Earth orbit, or if it didn't get into the right orbit, it may have got into an orbit about 100 miles up. But would that be sufficient to then circle the Earth twice and ignite the third stage for TLI, translunar injection, to accelerate the rocket to 25,000 miles an hour to escape velocity, to escape Earth's gravity? That is the problem. That is what has been raised as a serious question. What I'm trying to do is to illustrate the problem that we've got with the acceleration of the Saturn V rocket. And there's one other interesting little aside about the Saturn V rocket. Have you ever seen a film, television recording film, of the Saturn V rocket taking off and hearing it break the sound barrier?
No, I addressed this last time me and you talked on a different channel. We see it break the sound barrier. I believe I showed a picture of the Saturn V rocket in the middle of a sonic boom, in which sonic booms are visible things that you can see. But I'm just looking at the chats, and Ugly German Truths brings up some good points. The rate of acceleration is accelerating itself as the rocket goes up. It's not one uniform rate of acceleration as you would expect for something that has gears. It's the rocket itself is losing weight as it goes up into the sky because it's burning fuel, which means that its rate of acceleration is also accelerating and then staged.
Delta V.
Yeah, the thrust to weight ratio is the entire trip leaning into the thrust side, if that makes any sense. So I don't really know what you are complaining about when all you've got to go on is it looks like therefore it is. I believe is what you're running on with that. And I don't really know what the complaint is here.
It's not going fast enough.
I realize that you're saying that it's not going fast enough to reach low Earth orbit, but I don't see how you're. I don't see what evidence you've got to show that, per se.
The malfunction of the F1 engine.
What malfunction of the F1 engine?
Sorry?
What malfunction of the F1 engine?
It wasn't producing enough power because it couldn't. Because if it produced the 1.5 million pounds of thrust we're told it did, the cooling required to keep the engine in one piece was inadequate to do it.
And who says that?
One of the problems with the cooling was that the metal used, I think it was an aluminium alloy, because the fuel was circulated around the skirt of the engine to cool the skirt and part of the engine before the fuel was then injected into the rocket itself, into the injectors, which were quite. I mean, we're talking thousands of gallons of fuel per second, if not a few tons per second. It was a massive undertaking to get it into the rocket and ignite it. If it didn't ignite correctly, because it wasn't flowing accurately, you would get what occurred on Apollo 6, the pogo effect, the jumping up and down.
It says that pogo effect wasn't affixed.
So far as I know, it wasn't fixed. They came up with a fix. They put an explosive charge in the combustion chamber.
Because I know this argument I know what this is that you're using, and this is Randy Walsh's stuff. And well, Randy Walsh is kind of running on nothing. He's running on some report made by some Russian at one point, and that report itself is not really running on anything. I would love to see something that definitely tells you that the rocket engines on the F1s weren't running at full power when they were launched.
The speed of launch would indicate that. Now, I don't think you can deny that the Soviet scientists or the Russian scientists who wrote the report that Randy references, I don't think you can say that they don't know what they're talking about, because they do.
All I've ever heard is just Russian scientist, and I looked up his name once, and I found literally nothing on the guy. And if you want to ask me, I think this is a case of people bolstering up or.
Look, if you're going to talk about this subject, there are certain websites you do need to go to, whether you like them or not. The references are there. It's the hourlist.com website. That's where the report is published.
Yeah, and all the places in which these reports are published are same places that have complete BS.
That's your opinion.
I've covered on my channel. People who run these sites, they're the same guys who complain as to why about the amount of doors on the why you had to open up 2 doors to get into the capsule when it launched and only had to get out of 1 door when it landed.
That's not on the Hour List website. I know what you're referring to, and it was a misreading, but it's not on the Hour List website. So don't claim that it was. It wasn't. It was on a completely different website. So to lump all these websites that you don't like together,
not that I don't like them,
does a complete disservice to a lot of people who've put a lot of time and effort into the subject. I think you should start taking a bit more notice of what they're saying.
Scientists had
not just denying it.
Hang on. We're talking over each other a lot here.
Yeah, Blue. If the scientist had a big deal, then why is he only published on Alice websites? Why is he only published on websites that believe that the moon landing was fake?
How do you know? How do you know that is the only site he's published on?
Because I haven't know that anything on it anywhere else, and the only people who mention anything on it are you guys.
And what's the problem with that?
The problem with that is that you can't be independently. It cannot have 2 sources. It's one people saying one thing, and I can't even find anything on the Russian scientist.
Maybe he's not using his real name.
Jeez, why is he not using his real name? He's supposed to be
because of the sort of attack, because of the sort of business that you've just described.
If he's using a fake name, then how in the world can you verify who he is and verify his attributes?
I don't know if he is using a false name. I'm just putting it forward as a suggestion. But you say you can't find him. You obviously haven't looked. I'll find it for you.
First time I was given this report, I looked up the guy's name. I didn't find anything on him.
Hang on a minute. I'll find it for you and give you the reference. because there are plenty of references there.
Running into Randy Walsh's argument, which
So obviously you don't fully go along with all Randy's saying.
Randy's.
Have you read his book?
All right. So when it comes to his book,
Blue, answer the question. Have you read Randy's?
Read the bits that are free online of his book. The bits that are free online of his book. Oh God. Oh man. I thought about covering it once, but I found better topics to cover, but I did read the bits that are online, and it's just poor, is what it is.
That's your opinion.
He wouldn't give me his. He would not give me his the free link to his book, and I'm not going to pay him money to go to see the book.
That tells you all you need to know about your level of research.
What do you mean?
That you're not prepared to pay any money for it.
That's more of a principle. Out of the things that he said to me over email chain, which I will not release because I don't want to release emails, but after the things that he said to me, no, I'm not going to pay him money. After the things that he's called me and the way that he's treated me and the way that he's talked to me, I'm not giving that man any money.
That's between you and him. All I'm saying is
so you can't criticize me on my research level if me trying to research a subject that honestly isn't that big of a deal requires me paying money to a guy who's personally insulted me. Sorry, that's not a thing that you can criticize me on. I'm not going to pay a man who's insulted me. It's
entirely between you and Randy. The arguments that you may have that gets to personalities. What I'm talking about here,
not something that's really significant to debunk, either.
But if you haven't read the book, you wouldn't be able to make that decision.
I've read the bits that are online.
That's not enough to do it.
It's 70
What I'm saying is that you've got to do the proper research.
What makes you think I haven't done proper research here? What makes you think I haven't done proper research? You guys, let me see this up. You got to do the research. You got to do the research. Here's all of our websites that you got to do the research. What makes you think that we haven't read bits from these websites? What makes you think that we haven't seen all of y'all's videos? That we haven't been doing all these things?
Right. Which videos have you watched?
What do you mean? Which videos have I watched? I've watched multiple of Randy Walsh's videos. I've actually seen every single video on his channel at least once. I've sat there and watched through them. I've watched through two of y'all's the Apollo Detectives podcast that you're on all the time. I've watched two of those. I watch a lot of the Shill Stompers channel. I'll check in on that every now and then. And then I've seen 4 or 5 full-length, like hour and 30-minute documentaries on the subject, including the one on the ILS website, including the one made by Bart Sabrell. I haven't seen his new one, but his new one is on the Planet X stuff. And that's just on y'all's research. When it comes to the NASA researches and stuff like that, I have traveled to locations. I have read the entirety of the moon lander and the lunar rover's manual. I have just sat down and just grabbed documents from a shelf because we have 3 shelves worth of NASA documents at UAB's library, and I every now and then I'll just sit down and just grab documents off the shelf and start reading them. And I've done a bunch of other stuff too, including seeing countless amounts of documentaries on the subject, religiously watching them because I find them very fascinating. And when it just comes to general conspiracy theory, I watch a bunch of general conspiracy theory documentaries as well. So to sit here and say that I need to do my research, it's very insulting. And you guys, and it's just something that you always just go down to. You guys, virtually every form of conspiracy theorist, they always just result to just do your research, just do your research, just do your research. I have done the research.
Well, so have I.
Just because I don't know this one small thing that you know, doesn't mean I haven't done my research.
Yes. Okay. Go on.
All right. So
right. The article on the Saturn V the F1 engine is by Gennady Ivankov, PhD. I wonder what he goes PhD in.
How do you spell that first name, Marcus?
Gennady. Gennady, and then IVCHENKOV.
Okay, thank you.
And the Bauman Moscow State Technical University. Graduated from there in 1974.
So he graduated there under the Soviet rule.
Yep, majoring in aircraft engines specialization. Right. Gennady holds 7 US patents, fiber optic sensors, and switches, apparently. So that's one of the articles. And the full paper, I think, is many pages. It's not even on there anymore. I believe it's about 50 pages long, the original article, which is what Randy's based a considerable amount of his chapters on the F1 engine on. So if you can find anything on that, be interested to hear. Yeah, one of the points he makes is consequently, the pressure in the F1 combustion chamber is likely to have been significantly lower than stated due to fundamental shortcomings in the tubular cooling system of the F1 engine. And that is below a picture of an F1 engine at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, which I believe was recovered by Jeff Bezos and is now in Seattle Museum. So you can go and look at it. But it's the cooling system which caused the problem.
Okay.
So that's part of the article by Gennady.
All right.
Did the F1 rocket engines correspond to NASA's published data? And was there a fundamental design flaw in the F1 engine? That's the start of the article. And basically comes to the conclusion, yes, there was. But the original article on which this is based is much longer.
Okay, then how is it with the F1 engines on the test stands we did get the maximum output without pogo oscillation?
Yeah, this is a point Randy makes in his book that doing it a static test of an engine is not the same as the engine under flight conditions. We've got variable pressures, variable temperatures and speeds. Yes, static tests are necessary, and jet engines have those in the thousands of hours. The F1 engine did have static testing, certainly. We've seen film of it. But the only in-flight testing that the F1 engine had was in the Apollo 6.
It does. First off, we're talking about a difference between a jet engine that would cost maybe $1 million and a F1 engine which costs tens of millions of dollars each. Massive differences in money. So, and then the jet engines are much readily available than an F1 engine. So, every time you launch an F1 engine in flight conditions, you lose the engine. So that would be a very good motivation as to not test them in flight as much as possible. So we got one test done in flight. We found the problems. We went back to the static testing, figured out the problem and how to solve it in the static testing. Time to launch it in flight again. The pogo oscillations on Apollo 6 were not cause for abort, and they were not cause for concern of the astronaut safety. So testing them again, where the worst outcome that can happen, or the worst likely outcome that could happen, was again pogo oscillations. Then you just make it to low Earth orbit and you fall back down. Everything's safe and fine. So,
what do you mean make it to low Earth orbit and fall back down? What are you talking about?
Well,
low Earth orbit is getting to Earth from low Earth orbit is a major undertaking.
Yeah, and Apollo 6 accomplished that. Apollo 6 went to low Earth orbit. It orbited around the Earth.
Yes, and
it had pogo oscillations.
And what happened
Okay,
then?
so if the pogo oscillations at worst make it go into low Earth orbit, then the thing that you're worried about is having Apollo 8 just not make it to the moon. It just makes it to low Earth orbit, and then in which you just end the mission there and bring it back down. Your astronauts are still safe.
You see, this is where we
figured out more and more, and you just use that as more as testing.
This is where we differ in our approach. I say that there were major problems with Apollo 6. You say there were minor problems with Apollo 6.
Yes, I say they're minor problems because it still accomplished every single one of its goals, and every engineer that would talk about this says it's minor problems. You say they're major problems, and I'm going to play a little armchair psychology here. It's because you want to confirm your biases.
Yeah, of course I do. That's what I'm doing. That's what I'm doing. Same as you're doing.
I'm using other people's words.
Yeah, and I'm using other people's words too.
Words of the engineers who worked on these engines.
And you believe everything that everybody tells you is 100% true.
I don't think. First off, that's a massive straw man. Don't do that. And I think that the engineers themselves didn't have a reason to lie. I think the engineers that worked on these engines, knowing how engineers work, I don't think they have a reason to lie, and I don't think they would have.
No, I would agree with you. I would say that the majority, if not everybody, working on Apollo during the 60s was doing the very best job they could. They were building the best rockets, the best engines, the best landers, the best everything, the best of everything. Mm-hmm. This was going to be seen live on television. They didn't know that what they had built worked until they saw it launched and reported back by NASA as to what happened. They didn't know if the spacesuits worked. They didn't know if the engines worked according to their specification. They hoped they would, obviously, because they designed them as best they could. Don't forget they were using slide rules, but that's a minus point. They were doing the best job they could, and they would see the result of their work on television, live on television, don't forget, as the rockets launched from Apollo 8 onwards. There she goes. Tens of thousands of people watched the launch. The launch was real, no doubt about that. The rocket worked, no doubt about that. Did it do what it was supposed to have done? Did it do what we are told it did? And this is the point I come in with a question. How do we know it did what we're told it did? Because NASA tells us that it did it. Oh, great. The people responsible for it are reporting on the success of it. Now, I don't happen to believe that NASA tells the truth at all times. As the New York Times dubbed them many years ago, never a straight answer. They tend to dissemble when things get a bit rough. Now, if there was a decision made at a very high level, politically and at NASA, that getting to the moon under the conditions that were known to exist on the moon, because they'd sent unmanned craft there, the surveyor, the ranger, the surveyor, and the orbiter craft, they knew what the conditions were. Could they land humans live on television safely and return them safely back to Earth with no possible problem and no possible difficulty? Could NASA guarantee that? NASA would say, yes, of course we can.
You can't guarantee yourself going to work in the morning.
Exactly. So if they're going to do it live on television, it has to be seen to work, because otherwise you don't want astronauts dying live on television. Forget that. That's not going to happen.
14 of them have died live on television.
Yeah. There's a risk to space travel. Everybody knows that there's a risk. They knew there was a risk. In fact, the Apollo mission had some of the highest risk levels of any of the missions that we've ever done.
If I remember correctly, I heard someone once quote Apollo 11 as having a 50-50 chance of even working.
I think the actual one was a 90% chance of it being successful, which that's a term that I've heard thrown around.
Okay, even 90 by modern standards is pretty low.
Oh yeah, no. If it's like down to like a 1% chance, they're not going to launch. I think it was the most risky, the highest level of failure of any of our launches that we've ever done. Don't quote me on that, but that's what I've always.
Do you mean all human spaceflight launches or just NASA? Because I am pretty sure the Soviets killed a lot of people that we don't know about.
Yeah, they did.
I actually don't know about that one, but like I've done a little stuff into that, and I think all the people that was supposedly killed were accounted for. They were just unpersoned there in the USSR because they did bad things, like I don't know, like stay up after curfew, because that's how the USSR worked. But
have you heard?
I'm sorry, guys. I just wanted to say the reason I cut in here was because we're coming up on the 2-hour mark, and I figured this would be a good time to go to the super chats, read some questions from the chat.
Okay.
Are we? I'm just curious. Are we thinking a round 3 is coming here?
Does look like it. Blue's already said he's going to do some good research.
All
right. Well, I mean, we can set that. Hopefully we can set that up sometime.
Well, certainly the last one had quite a high viewing figure, which I was very pleased to see. Some interesting comments on the live chat.
I didn't. Yeah, it did good, and this one did good too. I've been looking at the count now, and I think that's pretty good for you, Dead Kennedy, right?
I haven't seen the how many people are watching, but there's 64 likes, so that tells me something.
Yeah, that's good. 1 dislike. Oh no, I wonder who that was. Marcus, you didn't dislike the stream.
I bet that was Barry Stream. Barry Sheen is his name. He automatically dislikes anything I put out. He's a flat earther.
Oh really?
Yeah, I'm not a flat earther, by the way.
Everybody, every time I see that mentioned in chat, I've been telling them, you're not a flat earther. You're not. You're not.
It's come up a couple times because it is the primary thing I kind of deal with on this channel, but yeah. I have made sure to let people know, no, you are not a flat earther.
Yeah,
but
we do everything.
Sorry?
Yeah, we do everything we can to inform people that you're not a flat earther, but sadly, you also say NASA lies, and our audience, they hear anybody say NASA lies, they get triggered and they can think of flat earther. I'm just messing with you there, Marcus.
All right, so what we'll do here is I'm going to read through the super chats because some of them are questions for you guys. Okay. And then after those, if you guys want to tag me, I'll try and ask as many questions as I see. If I miss you, I'm sorry, but spam it a couple more times. If I do miss it, maybe I'll get it. So to start with super chats here, we had first one was Crafty Keela for €2. She said, "Love and support. Have a great show." Thank you so much, Crafty Keela. I appreciate that. GPS for $2 said, "Hope you and everyone else are doing well." I'm doing okay. Blue, how are you doing, man?
I am doing fine. My day will consist of me doing this debate or discussion and probably playing Crusader Kings and Assassin's Creed for the rest of the day because it's the weekend. Nice. And I'm going to enjoy it.
Nice. Planet Zoo for me.
Real quick, I want to mention it's my sister's birthday, so happy birthday to my sister. I'll just mention that real quick.
Happy birthday to Blue's sister.
Yep.
Happy birthday, Blue sister.
Marcus, yourself, doing well over on your side of the world?
Yeah, doing fine. Yeah, night has fallen over here, so it's going to come up a nice day tomorrow. It's been high temperatures. I mean, when you say 20 centigrade in the UK is quite warm, and we're not going to get any rain for another month. So obviously there's some strange things happening out there. But at the moment, no, it's fine. We're still mostly in lockdown, though certain senior government officials managed to avoid it, and they're getting real trouble for it, which is always amusing. And there's that famous professor, the professor who came out with his prediction of 500,000 deaths from this virus in the UK if we didn't lock down. Guess what? He didn't lock down. He invited his mistress over for a session.
Huh.
And he got discovered, so he had to resign. Aha! Sorry.
Wow.
How are the mighty fallen? Dear, oh dear. So, science doesn't always work according to the guidebooks. They work according to the emotions of people involved.
That's fair.
That's
fair. Mirai Vegeta for $5. Thank you very much, my pet Saiyan. She said, "Got my Trump bucks, so have some. Already know the show went great." Thank you. You know what? Thanks to Donald Trump. Appreciate that. Mr. President. What's that?
I never got Trump bucks.
Oh, that sucks.
I know.
I got Trudeau bucks. They're serving me nicely. Mr. President 99 for €5 said, quick question, the USA and... Oh, wow. You know what? I have a habit. I'm going to do this anyway. I'm going to read all of these phonetically. Quick question, the USA and Soviet Union, we're in a state of Cold War. Don't you think they would be the first to pick out any inconsistency?
I think that's for you, Marcus.
That's always the first question that comes up, and let's just address it, shall we? Because first point, who would have blown the whistle? That's an expression. If somebody discovers something is wrong, they blow the whistle to announce that they have discovered the errors. So why didn't the Soviet Union come out and say, oh, America aren't doing what they say they're doing? Because they didn't do that, which implies that either they didn't know or they knew perfectly well what was happening and decided to keep quiet about it. Because how would it be to their benefit to embarrass America? It wouldn't, because in September 1968, the Soviet Union, which has one major export product called natural gas, had just signed a new contract to supply natural gas into Western Europe. Don't forget, the Cold War was on, the Iron Curtain existed, Europe was divided between East and West Europe. So in September 1968, the contract was signed to supply West Europe with Russian natural gas. They weren't about to jeopardize something on which their national security and livelihood depended. If they thought that a few Americans were prancing around on the moon, but they weren't actually there, it was all done in a film studio somewhere, it was all done on some sort of models. They weren't really interested, not part of their thing. And anyway, the invitation to cooperate with the Soviet Union, between America and the Soviet Union, had been made in 1963 by John Kennedy. It wasn't taken up. There was no cooperation until the Apollo-Soyuz project in 1975. So why would the Soviet Union have done anything like that? It makes no sense. A much better question would be, why did no engineer, scientist, photographer, biologist, anthropologist, or any ologist you can think of, why did nobody in the West question it? And the answer is they did. There were a lot of people who questioned it. One of them who questioned it was Bill Clinton. He outlines it in his book, his biography, My Life. So there were people who questioned it. It's not as if this is a done deal. There are plenty of people who questioned it. There are plenty of people who challenged what had happened. And the other question normally asked, and it'll probably appear on the live chat there, is, well, how could 400,000 people who worked on Apollo keep a secret? They didn't need to keep a secret. They didn't know anything about it. It wasn't part of their activity. They were doing the best job they could. They were going to see it live on television, the same as the rest of us did. So the Russians weren't going to blow the whistle because there was nothing to blow. There was no hoax to expose because they didn't know how they'd done it. The 400,000 people who worked on Apollo, which obviously included quite a few drivers, cafeteria staff, secretaries, and ancillary workers, who were just as important as the rocket scientists, of whom there were quite a few thousand, they were doing the best job they could. It's called compartmentalization. It's a military term because the US Air Force were running the Apollo program. They were brought in to get the thing back on track after Apollo 1.
Okay.
They happened. So hopefully that answers that question and any others along the same lines.
All right, fair enough.
Okay.
Ben Smith for £4.99 said, oh boy. Okay, I'm sorry in advance, Marcus. I think this has some UK slang that's meant to be offensive.
Go on. Go on. Let's hear it.
Marcus, light reflectors are on the moon, and you are a plastic scouser. 20 times Manchester United.
You see, I've triggered somebody. Manchester United supporters are definitely not Liverpool supporters. The two are the two major clubs which have major antagonism against each other. So that's a Scouser is a Liverpool person. Somebody comes from Liverpool. Obviously, he doesn't agree with my contention that there were no people on the moon. But leave that aside. He's obviously far more concerned with my support of Liverpool, who are about to win the Premier League this year.
Can I just state that I don't know what this means for me, but go Arsenal. I talk about Premier League, go Arsenal, and second hand, let's go Brums, Birmingham City.
Yeah, somebody has to go Arsenal. Well, thank you for doing it. I'm sure that a lot of Arsenal supporters will be very pleased to hear that. And Birmingham, yes, Birmingham City are a football team that they're not. Let's just say they're not in the top 10 teams in Britain.
Oh, absolutely not. No, but blue all the way. There we go. They help out. They help out my team, Birmingham Legion, which is the team in Birmingham, Alabama.
Yeah.
They have like an help each other out, which is really cool.
Okay. Now, I'm sure it has a great team, a great university. It's a wonderful city, and anybody who's been there will only speak very highly of it because it's such a beautiful place.
It is.
So have I redeemed myself a little bit there?
Yeah. I just like shooting stuff at the Brum.
Well, somebody has to.
Yep.
My first job was in Birmingham, UK. I was working on construction of a hotel in Birmingham, about 60 years ago. You can tell how old I am. And it was torn down last year.
What's the got other snap or super chats?
Yeah, we got a few more here. Mr. President 99 for 10 euros. Thank you very much. Do you have any idea how much money they put in the Apollo program? With enough money, everything is possible, and yet it wasn't possible to fake the footage of the landing.
What?
Oh, so I'm guessing that one's addressed to me.
No, I think that's more towards Marcus. He's saying how much money. Do you have any idea how much money they put in the Apollo program? With enough money, everything is possible, and yet it wasn't possible to fake the footage of the landing.
Yeah, I think
right.
That was impossible.
It's a slight non sequitur there. One doesn't follow the other. Yes, there was a lot of money. 25 billion is the figure normally quoted in $1970, which is equivalent to about 175 billion today. It's similar cost to what the space shuttle and the ISS have cost. It's big money, but in terms of the US national budget, it's less than 0.5% even today. So, yes, with enough money, anything is possible. Believe me, the US debt is pretty high. The UK debt is pretty high. So they seem to be able to borrow money at random. So money obviously isn't an important thing, but it's interesting what happened, I think, about 3 months ago with the Federal Reserve. It got folded into the US Treasury, which, given that it's a private company, the Federal Reserve is a private company, basically it got nationalized. Didn't hear much about it on the news, did we?
Oh.
No.
I know nothing about economics.
No.
So.
Okay. Well, it's not so much economics, it's more to do with control. But that's another story for another time.
Yeah.
All right, so we had...
I just one thing on that question.
Yeah.
I don't know. I still kind of think that was a little bit addressed towards me a little bit when I keep saying it was impossible to fake the footage. That doesn't have anything to do with money. It only has to do with lighting and the technology that was available back then, and just the way that the inverse square law works.
Right. No, I know for a fact that Mr. President 99 believes we went to the moon.
Okay. I didn't know if that was addressed to me or not because it
Okay.
sounded, it was worded, it sounded like it was.
All right, fair enough. We also had... Oh, where did we go here? Okay. Nenad Kudik for 10 Bosnia Herzegovina convertible mark.
Yeah, Bosnia-Herzegovina.
Which that's the first time I've seen that currency. They said, what about third-party confirmations of Apollo missions?
Okay, Blue, do you want to do that one?
Third-party confirmations of the Apollo missions?
I'm guessing things like ham radio operators.
Yeah, the ham radio operators, they only contact people when they're in space, when they're low Earth orbit. So
Yeah.
it wouldn't be any ham radio operators. If you're talking about the third-party people, that would be the reflectors on the moon. Those are done by private. Those can be done by private universities. And then you have the
What? Don't get that.
the reflectors on the moon. They're done by universities.
Well, they were put there by Apollo, allegedly.
Well, yeah, but the laser that shot up and then measured when it comes back down.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Just one point on that. Who were the first people to shoot a laser at the moon and get a reflection back?
I think it was,
And-
wasn't it Jojo Bank?
No, it was the Massachusetts Institute of Technology
I think
in 1963 when there were no reflectors on the moon. So they're reflecting the laser off the lunar surface.
it's not about getting reflection back. It's about the amount of reflection that gets back.
And that's important.
Yeah. If you shoot it if you just shoot it at a random place on the moon, you're going to get one base amount of light back in your reflector. If you shoot it at the reflectors that are sitting on the moon, you're going to get a completely different amount.
Right. What diameter is the laser when it reaches the moon?
Small enough that you can accurately shoot it.
Right. It's 2 kilometers in diameter.
Yeah.
That's tiny.
What?
That's tiny.
Yes, it's tiny. What size is the reflector?
Small.
About
4 meters.
About less than half a square meter.
Oh,
Yeah, they're small. Yeah.
They're quite small. Well, they had to get it anyway. So if you divide, or use the formula for the area of a circle, pi r squared, and the diameter and the radius is 1 kilometer times pi. Basically, what I'm saying is that the area that the mirror covers in the laser diameter is so small as to be almost impossible to identify. Because what area is this reflection when it gets back to Earth?
You expect the reflection to be extremely small when it comes back to Earth.
Yes,
With the reflector, you expect it to be tiny.
yes, a few photons of light.
Yeah, and if you shoot it anywhere else on the moon, you get even less.
Yeah. Now the same experiment was done the following year in the Soviet Union, and they got the same result. In the 1940s, radar signals are being bounced off the moon. Radio signals are bounced off the moon. So it's a very secure form of communication. If you can pick up the returning signal, very few people have the equipment to listen into you.
No one's arguing that you get something back from the moon when you shoot a laser at it at a random spot. It's all about the difference between when you shoot it at the reflectors versus when you shoot it at another random spot. You can shoot it at literally everywhere that there is not a reflector on the moon, and you get the same result. And then when you shoot it at a reflector, you get a different result. That's why, and these are very sensitive sensors that pick this stuff up.
Yeah, they have to be.
Mhm.
They have.
So if you're getting a different result only where the reflectors are, what does that tell you?
But how do you know where the reflectors are?
Because
So
we know where the landing sites are. We have the coordinates for the landing sites.
Well,
And the coordinates go down.
if you examine that, you'll find that NASA provide you with 10 different coordinates for each landing site.
We talked about this last time, and we can only find. And me and you, we both looked into it live on stream. We only found 2 different ones. The 2 different ones were a completely different way of writing the coordinate system, and they both point to the same general area. And the general area is small enough that a 2-kilometer radius would easily encapsulate both of the reflectors that are down there.
Okay, all right, fair enough. I just don't think you need a reflector to get a decent signal back. Nice shiny rock.
Then why are the nice shiny rocks only in the places of the landing sites?
Because that's how they managed to light up all the astronauts climbing out of the shadow side of the lunar lander. The highly reflective lunar surface, we're told, is what.
Okay, but that highly reflective lunar surface is the entire lunar surface. So if I shoot it at random point on lunar surface and I get result A, and then I shoot it at random point in the lunar surface, I still get result A, and then I shine it at the landing site, I get result B. Why is it I'm only getting result B on landing site while I'm getting result A everywhere else I randomly pointed at on the moon?
Are you quoting the Mythbusters program?
No, I'm not.
Because they allegedly did this. I think it was the McDonald Observatory in Texas they used, which had been doing it for some time.
California.
And
I have been.
I wasn't totally convinced by the evidence they produced for that, but never mind.
No, I'm quoting other documentaries.
All right, fair enough.
Not the Mythbusters one. All right, so we have another.
Yeah. We got a couple more here. This one, I'm going to say I think we more or less discussed this topic to death, but if you guys want to add anything to it, go ahead. Mr. President 99, again, for 10 euros, man, you give me all your money, and I love you for it. The radiation was so weak to my knowledge that the amount of radiation passing through the shielding of aluminum foil in the rocket, it was negligible.
Now, there speaks somebody with great confidence and understanding and knowledge of radiation in space. I wonder where he gets it from. You could probably post a free question at this point, or a pre-answer at that point, because I would like to know where somebody gets it from. Look, if I'm wrong about the radiation, I want to know. I haven't been persuaded yet that I am.
Okay.
So, if somebody can come up with the evidence, say, radiation in space is really no more than a couple of chest x-rays, nothing to worry about, don't even bother to harden your satellites, don't even bother to protect the astronauts. Yeah, fair enough. But let's see the evidence that that is the answer, because I'm yet to be persuaded that it is.
Okay, fair enough. Johnny Ragadoo for $5 said, oh, this is good. He said, I started with $14.7 and squandered my savings down to 10 to the negative $15. I felt sorry for myself until I realized I only lost $15.
Wait, can you repeat that?
What? Mathematics obviously not a strong point there.
I started with $14.7 and squandered my savings down to 10 to the negative $15. I felt sorry for myself until I realized I only lost $15.
Oh yeah, so he's saying that he started at 14.7 and he went all the way down to 0.
Right.
Yeah, and then he's like, oh, I felt really bad for myself, and then I realized, oh no, I only lost $15, even though he lost 100% of his money. Okay.
Yes. 14.7 being atmospheric pressure at sea level in pounds per square inch.
Yeah. I get the joke. Yeah.
I enjoyed it. Mr. President 99 for another 10 euros. This one's just one of those little like GIF emoji things. It's a hippo giving an uppercut and it says KO. And the best thing is if you rewatch the stream, the chat that's on stream, it does a really, really in-depth description of what that GIF is doing. It's like animated hippo anthropomorphic cartoon swings upward violently with the letters KO appearing behind its head.
That's all right. That's funny.
And then another 10 euros from President 99. He said, if what you say is true, why would they do the whole show with Apollo 13? Just so to fake it? They did fly around the moon after all.
I believe you had a good answer on this, Marcus. That I heard last time.
Well, on Apollo 13, yeah, one of the best pieces of script writing ever done. Wonderful. There's the mystery of the Apollo command module found in the Atlantic Ocean the day after the Apollo 13 launch, which was April the 11th, 1970, was the official launch of Apollo 13. That happened. A lot of people watched it. Rocket goes up, disappears, and next day, the Soviet Navy, who were conducting exercise in the Bay of Biscay, came across the Apollo command module. I'm not saying the Apollo command module, an Apollo command module. There's no doubt about it. There are photographs of it. It says NASA on it. It was taken by the Soviet Navy to Murmansk in northern Russia, off just east of Norway, the base for the Atlantic Fleet, who were doing the exercises. And it was handed over to the US Coast Guard cutter, the South Wind, on September the 6th, 1970. Brought back to the US, and it's now on display outside Grand Rapids Museum in Michigan. You can go and see it. It's white, you know, you can see it's a command module. What the hell was it doing in the Atlantic Ocean? Even if it wasn't Apollo 13, even if it wasn't, it's supposed to be what's called boilerplate 1227, BP 1227. Boilerplate was a practice command modules. They used them. They weren't full command modules. They didn't have all the kit on board, but they were used to practice for astronauts or getting out of them when they were dropped in the ocean and what would happen if things happened. So they didn't use a full command module. They used what's called a boilerplate, a mock-up version. But what the hell was it doing in the Bay of Biscay? A day after the official launch of Apollo 13. Now, when the Apollo missions were launched, they would follow a similar trajectory and they would go out over Africa. And most astronauts would look out for what's called the Eye of Africa, which is a very visible physical feature in Mauritania called the Richat structure, R-I-C-H-A-T, Richat structure. It's 3 concentric circles about 20 kilometers in diameter. It's very visible. Astronauts would look out for it, so they knew, well, at least we got to Africa, guys. Let's go on. The Richat structure is in Mauritania, which is about 1,500 miles south of the Bay of Biscay. So either Apollo 13 malfunctioned and had to ditch in the Atlantic, which is where the rockets were sent anyway, or it was a boilerplate version of the Apollo command module, in which case there are question marks, serious question marks. If you drop something, right, let's say it's a boilerplate. Let's say it was dropped off the side of a ship. Oh, God, what's happened? Oh, we dropped it over. It's drifted away. Oh, well, somebody will see it. If it was dropped off the coast of Florida, because they didn't practice anything in the Bay of Biscay, it's 2,000 miles from Florida to the Bay of Biscay, which is off the coast of France and Spain. How long would it take to drift there? About 5 or 6 weeks. There would be some evidence of marine life on it. Barnacles, seaweed, algae, all the stuff that you get if you leave a boat in the sea for too long. None of that appeared. There were no barnacles, there were nothing. It's as if it had just come down. It hadn't drifted across. It was never reported missing. So there's a real mystery. This thing was real. There are photographs of it on the USS Coast Guard cutter South Wind. What the hell was it doing there? Nobody's ever come up with a decent answer to it yet. And the coincidence mounts up when you realize it was 24 hours, it was picked up 24 hours after the official launch.
Lost?
Oh, sorry, say it again, I didn't hear.
The boilerplate that was found, was it not being used by the UK, by England, when it was lost?
No, it wasn't. The UK didn't use Apollo boilerplates. They had no reason to.
Okay, we are back now for sure, sorry.
Okay. The only US publication that reported the recovery of this capsule was the Stars and Stripes, US military publication in 1970. It wasn't widely reported. So obviously, you know, losing a boilerplate, losing any capsule, losing anything is a bit of a downer for NASA. They weren't about to publicize it, and they didn't. So if you've managed to lose one of your practice command modules, let's just say it's there. Let's not worry about it being the official Apollo 13. Let's just say it was a boilerplate. You think they would have reported it missing. You think they would have been a little bit embarrassed that the Soviet Navy found it, took it back to Russia, and handed it over 6 months later, having had a good hard look at what was inside. But the one that is now on display at the Grand Rapids Museum in Michigan has been sealed till 2076. 300th anniversary of the creation of the United States. The successful War of Independence against...
Oh, Christ. The Skype call just... Sorry, guys. Skype call completely crapped out. Let me try and get back in here.
We get
Hello.
the chat? Yeah.
Under the Russians and the space race.
Again, guys, I'm sorry. I think we need to get wrapping this up because I think my PC is getting a little warm, and I think that's why.
I can hear it through your microphone.
All right, yeah. Whoa, Jesus! I just put my hand near it. Yeah, it's time to wrap things up. I'm really sorry, guys. We were getting a bunch of interruptions there.
All right.
The last two super chats really quickly. Chris Kelling for $10 said Soviet engineers, the same ones that had a rocket with 29 engines, all needed all to fire at the same time and never did. I'm not sure what he's referring to.
I don't know.
He's referring to the N1 rocket, which was the Soviet version of a Saturn V. They had 30 engines, and they had 4 test flights. All of them failed. It's very ironic that SpaceX's new super-duper rocket has got 30 engines. I hope it hasn't the same effect.
Okay.
One thing...
And the last super chat is one we've addressed already as well. Andreas Eld for 20 sex, which is what is that again? That's Swedish krona.
What a wide audience you've got.
Yeah, I'm really surprised. There's lots of people from Australia. There's a couple people from South Korea. There's really interesting all over the place. And there was just another one as well from John Rapp for speaking of Australian 5. He said, "Good morning, Kevin, guests, and awesome chat peoples. Am lurking while working. Always good to see you, John Rapp. Everybody, please greet John in the appropriate manner in the chat." And that's all of the super chats. Again, I do want to thank both of you guys for coming and having a civil conversation here. A lot of people have been talking about that, mentioning that they're a little surprised that it's been so civil. Are you guys still there?
Yeah, still here.
Okay,
Sure.
Sorry, both of your webcam feeds went green for me, and it was very quiet, so I wasn't sure. But you were just letting me talk. Thank you. Sorry.
No.
Okay.
No, it's good.
And again, thank you guys very much for coming. It sounds like we're gonna set up for round 3 and do this again sometime, which I look forward to because this has been again a really great discussion. And I want to thank the chat for coming. I hope everybody's staying safe, and I hope to see you all sometime relatively soon. With that, let's just quickly here. Marcus, do you want any kind of last words here? Give yourself 2 minutes.
Just say that I really appreciate the courtesy you've extended to me, because you could well have shouted me down many times. But then I am a Brit and I'm used to it, so don't worry about it. Yes, anybody who would like to make any comment, contact me. You can do it either through the aulis.com website, that's AULIS.com, or nexusmagazine.com. I'm the UK publisher of Nexus Magazine, the world's leading alternative news magazine, which is essential reading for anybody trying to navigate their way through these contentious times. It's a fascinating subject, the whole space travel. I'm absolutely fascinated by it, as I think both of you are. And I do appreciate that we have different approaches to it, different views, but eventually somebody will return to the lunar surface. President Trump has said that must happen, basically before the end of his second term. If it doesn't happen, he's going to get particularly upset and start calling NASA out. He said, well, if it's so easy for you to do 50 years ago, what's the problem today, guys? Get on with it, is likely to be his response. It's interesting that the head of human space travel, I think at NASA, forgotten his name, resigned last week. He seemed to have got involved in a bit of skullduggery somewhere. I don't know what happened, but he resigned. Second one to resign in a year. Very unfortunate to lose people like that. I hope that I hope they do get back to the moon. I really do hope, because then we can have a look at the Apollo landing sites and confirm that they're real. It hasn't happened yet. Lunar reconnaissance orbiter photographs do not persuade me that those are photographs of what we're told they are. They're very good photoshopped images.
I
Okay.
will say I am equally excited to see a new person stand directly beside the Apollo landing sites. I think that would be amazing.
So cool. That would.
But don't forget, they can't get closer than 2 kilometers. There's an exclusion zone around them. So they're going to have to get a telephoto lens to get the landers in the same picture.
Still be good enough for me.
Yep.
Blue, any last words, brother?
Oh man, nothing much. Just thanks for having us on. This was a lot of fun. I think this is actually a better discussion than we had last time. And I can't wait to have a third. Although I don't know when it would be. We have to figure it out. It'll have to be over the summer. And everything like that. But yeah, I guess. Thanks, Marcus, for being here. Again, great simple discussion. I saw a lot of people in the chat early on were complaining it wasn't a dumpster fire. We don't want fires. Dumpster fires bad. We don't want those.
You know what? Dumpster fires are fun and they have their purpose, but unless they're with a flat earther, I don't really need one.
I don't really care. I don't want them. I don't want to be in a dumpster fire. I don't like being upset. Sorry. I like pleasant feelings, not bad feelings.
That's fair.
But, yeah, but it was a lot. This was a lot of fun. I had a good time. I think we both brought up some cool subjects. I guess I'll shill myself real quick. Again, if you want to find me, my YouTube channel is Blue Earth Thing. I'm sorry that I only get 1 or 2 videos out a month, but that's all I can get out. But we're currently building an observatory called Happy Deer Observatory, and you can follow the progress of that on my YouTube channel. And it should be one of the largest observatories in the state of Alabama when it's finished.
And you'll be able to. Will you be able to see the landing sites from him?
No, we won't have a telescope that powerful. No.
No, I know.
Good
I know.
use of Saturn.
Even the Hubble isn't powerful enough.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy when you deal with telescopes. Like more money you put, the less more better it can get. Like,
yeah. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
All right. Well.
But thanks for having me on, man.
Yeah, definitely, man. Definitely.
And thanks, Kevin, for controlling everything so well.
Oh, you're very welcome.
A round of applause for Kevin.
Thanks, guys. Thanks very much. Thanks again to the chat for coming. And again, I will see you guys for round 2 at some point.
Round 3.
Round 3. Wow.
That's the one.
All right. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you.